I took a deep breath and tried to steady my voice. "You think you can just take what Grandma left me and pretend it's yours?" I said, my hands shaking. He smirked, leaning back like he was in control. "I didn't take anything. I just made sure it ended up with someone who deserves it," he replied. That smug tone reminded me exactly why this fight started, and why I couldn't let it go. I clenched my fists under the table, feeling the wood press into my skin. My heart was pounding so hard it almost drowned out his voice. "Deserves it?" I repeated, my voice breaking. "She wanted me to have it. She told me herself, in her own words, before she passed." For a moment, his eyes flickered, like he remembered that conversation too. But then the smirk returned. "Words mean nothing without proof," he said, each word slow and deliberate, like he was enjoying my frustration. I could feel my voice rising, but I didn't care anymore. "You think you're the hero here, but you're nothing but a thief," I said, my words sharp enough to cut. He leaned forward, his face inches from mine, and whispered, "You've always been jealous, and this just proves I was right about you." For a moment, I couldn't speak. It wasn't just the insult. It was the cold certainty in his voice that made my stomach turn. Later that evening, I overheard my parents talking in the kitchen. My mom's voice was low but sharp, accusing my brother of manipulating me for his own benefit. My dad tried to calm her down, but I could feel the tension seeping through the walls. That was the moment I realized this family drama wasn't just between us brothers. It had pulled in everyone under this roof. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own parents were siding with Daniel, defending his every action, as if I was the one causing trouble. "You've always been jealous of your brother," my father said coldly, his words cutting deeper than any argument. My mother just nodded in agreement, avoiding my eyes. In that moment, I realized it wasn't just Daniel I was fighting against. I stood there, my hands trembling slightly, as my mother paced the living room like a predator. The ticking of the old wall clock seemed louder than usual, each second stretching into an eternity. She finally stopped, turned to me, and said in a voice dripping with cold sarcasm, "Do you even realize what you've done to this family?" Her words cut deeper than any shout could. My brother leaned against the doorway, smirking faintly, as if enjoying the show. I could feel my chest tighten, my breath shallow, and for a moment I didn't know whether to defend myself or just walk out. I stood there in silence, my mind racing. Every word they threw at me felt like another weight pressing down on my chest. My father's voice cut through the air, dripping with disappointment, while my mother shook her head as if I had personally ruined her life. My brother, of course, stood in the corner with that smug grin, feeding them little comments to keep the fire going. I could feel my hands clench, not in anger, but in pure frustration. They weren't listening. They never did. My voice finally broke through the tension. "Do you even hear yourselves?" I asked, my tone sharper than I intended. My mother's lips pressed into a thin line, and she crossed her arms, as if to shield herself from my words. My father leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowing. Meanwhile, Daniel let out a quiet chuckle, like he was watching his favorite scene in a movie. The room felt smaller, the air heavier, and I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. Every second that passed made it clearer. This wasn't a discussion. It was a verdict. I could feel the room's tension suffocating me. My father's eyes burned with disappointment. My mother's lips pressed into that thin line I knew too well, and my brother just smirked, enjoying every second of my humiliation. I wanted to shout, to defend myself, but the weight of their combined judgment pinned me down. It wasn't just about the argument anymore. It felt like years of resentment, old wounds, and unspoken accusations had all come crashing down in this single moment. The room fell silent after my last words. My brother's face twisted, part anger, part something I couldn't quite name. Mom shifted uncomfortably, but she didn't defend me this time. That silence said more than any argument ever could. For the first time, I realized maybe I wasn't the only one who saw the truth. I stood there in the middle of the living room, feeling like the walls were closing in on me. My brother's words were still echoing in my head, each syllable dripping with venom. Mom sat on the couch, pretending to scroll through her phone, but I could see her eyes darting between us. Dad cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable, yet he didn't say a word. It was like everyone was waiting for me to either explode or break. And honestly, I didn't know which one was coming first. I took a deep breath and told my parents, "I can't keep living like this. You're tearing me apart." My father's expression hardened, while my mother's eyes welled up with tears. My brother scoffed from the corner, clearly enjoying the chaos. I realized in that moment they didn't care about fixing things, only about winning this twisted family game. I thought things couldn't get worse after that dinner, but I was wrong. The next morning, my mother cornered me in the kitchen while everyone else was still asleep. She started talking in a hushed, almost conspiratorial tone, telling me that I was losing control of the family and that my brother had every right to take over certain responsibilities. She made it sound like this was all for my own good, but every word felt like another stab in the back. I realized she wasn't just siding with him. She was actively helping him push me out. As the tension in the kitchen reached its peak, my father slammed his hand on the table. "Enough!" he shouted, his voice echoing through the house. Everyone froze, the only sound being the faint hum of the fridge. His eyes darted between me and my brother, his jaw clenched so tight it looked like it might crack. "This family is falling apart because of pride and grudges," he continued, his tone softer but still full of anger. For a moment, no one dared to breathe. I sat there in the kitchen, my hands wrapped tightly around a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. The voices from the living room grew louder, my parents blaming each other for raising me wrong, my brother adding fuel to the fire with sarcastic comments. I wanted to shout, to tell them to stop tearing each other apart, but my throat felt like it was closing. Deep down, I knew this wasn't just about today. It was years of resentment exploding all at once. I didn't think things could get worse, but that night proved me wrong. During dinner, Mom suddenly brought up every single mistake I'd made in my life. Failed classes, bad jobs, even the time I crashed Dad's car. She spoke like she'd been saving this list for years, and now she was unloading it in front of everyone. I felt like a kid again, trapped and humiliated, while my brother sat there smirking like he'd just won a prize. It wasn't about solving the fight anymore. It was about breaking me down completely. I tried to change the subject, but my father wasn't done. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, and said in that slow, deliberate tone that always meant trouble, "You think you're better than us now, just because you moved out?" My sister smirked into her drink, clearly enjoying the show. Mom's eyes darted between us, silently begging me not to answer. But my hands were trembling under the table, and the words were already forming on my tongue. I sat there in silence, my hands gripping the edge of the table so hard my knuckles turned white. The shouting around me had turned into background noise, a mix of my parents' accusations and my brother's smug laughter. Every word they threw at me felt like a stone, building a wall I couldn't break through. I realized in that moment, No matter how much truth I spoke, they had already chosen their side. And it wasn't mine. I took a deep breath, my hands trembling as I looked around the room. Everyone's faces were tense, their eyes locked on me, waiting for my response. For the first time in my life, I realized this wasn't just about who was right or wrong. It was about whether this family could still be a family after everything that had been said. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating, and I knew my next words could either build a bridge or burn it completely. I looked around the table one last time, the air so thick with resentment it was hard to breathe. My father's glare, my mother's cold silence, and my brother's smug smirk told me everything I needed to know. I didn't belong here anymore. "You know what?" I said, my voice shaking but loud enough to cut through the tension. "I'm done trying to earn love that was never real. You can keep your judgment, your gossip, and your fake smiles. I'm walking away." And I did. I walked out of that house, out of their lives, and never looked back. Years later, I'm living well, surrounded by people who actually care. And I've never once regretted closing that door.